Thank you very much for joining the talk. Thank you, Andrew, for having me and for the introduction. So I'm Niamh Fitzgerald, and I'm the National Organiser of the Irish Wetland Bird Survey with Birdwatch Ireland. And I'll tell you a little bit about that survey as we go on. But really tonight is going to be just a kind of basic look at most of our core wintering water birds and little tips on how to identify them and maybe pick apart some of the more complicated species that look helpfully very like each other. So yeah, as Andrew said, it's actually a really great time of year. I mean, in Ireland, especially when we don't have much separation in the seasons, it's so easy to feel like one month just rolls into the other and really glum about it. But actually, after all of our summer migrants leave us to go south, wintering water birds also fly south from their Arctic and northerly breeding grounds because they get frozen over, and Ireland actually provides a really nice temperate climate to for them to feed and bulk up for the winter, so that they can make the flight back and hopefully have a successful breeding season the next year. So it's something that I really appreciate in nature, that signals the change in seasons, and it's just provides something to get so excited about in winter, and a reason to get out there and be out and about, especially being involved in iWeb's counts. For myself, it really gets me out in these colder months. So what do I mean when I say water birds? Well, these are birds that are ecologically dependent on wetlands. And at iWeb's, the core species are that we concentrate on counting are wildfowl, so swans, geese, ducks, and what we call wildfowl allies, grebes, rails, cormorants, herons, divers, and waders, everything from the big to the small, curlew down to sanderling, and also gulls. And just a quick disclaimer that in this talk, I'll primarily be showing you pictures of wintering species. So I don't know if many of you have bird guides, but if you pick up a bird guide, there's bound to be different plumages being shown, and because a lot of birds will come into different plumage for the breeding season. But in winter, which is generally when they're a bit more drab, that's the plumage we'll be focusing on mostly. So if you're looking at the guide and wondering why the birds look quite different to what you've seen in the talk, that might be why. Species like ruff, for example, are completely different. The males are completely different in the breeding season, so they'd be nearly unrecognizable. And I'll also, some species juveniles look quite different, or can look different to adult birds, but I'll primarily be showing you pictures of adult birds. So just to keep that in mind in case you're confused afterwards when you go away and look at your guides. There may be the odd breeding plumage duck that slipped in there, but by and large, I'll cover in the winter plumages. And then when I say wetland, well, actually, this is a really broad term as well. So a wetland, by the Ramsar definition, is kind of anything from wet grassland to shallow coastline, everything in between. So as you can see on this list here, it covers a lot of different things, and we have a lot of different types of wetlands in Ireland, which might not surprise you given the amount that it rains here and how wet a country we have. And these habitats are really important for migrating species, as migration rest areas, but also for those species for food, also our own sake for food, for recreation, storing carbon, protecting floods, us from floods, filtering our water, supplying us with water, and just generally providing habitat to lots of different birds and biodiversity throughout the year. So it's really important to know about these wetland sites, to appreciate them, to be aware of why they're important, and also to protect them. For a long time, wetlands were thought of as wasteland, but in fact they're anything but. They're really magical places, and we definitely need to make sure we protect them going into the future. As I said, we have an abundance of them. So our location along this migration flyway, known as the East Atlantic Flyway, is just perfect to catch species that are filtering through on their way down to Africa to spend winter there, and hundreds of thousands stay here throughout the winter. Some just pass through, but a lot of them stay around because we have the majority of the time ice-free feeding that they can avail of all winter long. So our small island actually forms a really important part of the life cycle for these birds. This is just a quick view of the East Atlantic Flyway. This kind of funnel shape, as you can see, we're right there in the middle at the pinch point. So really good spot to catch all these birds. And it's important as well because these birds we share them internationally with other countries. So because of this, we're required to protect them, and we're required to know how they're doing. And so the National Parks and Wildlife Service and Department of the government are required by law to protect these habitats. And that's why, and as waterbirds are such a good indicator of wetland sites, that's why we monitor them. That's the first step, to see how they're doing as an indication of how the habitats are doing, and then designation of protected areas can be based on this information and can be further decided how to make decisions about developments and things like that. So as I said, the National Parks and Wildlife Service have to monitor these wetland sites and how they do that, and how the waterbirds are doing. How they do that is through the Irish Wetland Bird Survey, which is funded by the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and it is coordinated by Birdwatch Ireland. Each year, hundreds of volunteers, NPWS staff, Birdwatch Ireland staff take part in the survey and go out and count waterbirds at wetland sites all over Ireland, often in rain, hail, or shine. So it's a huge effort goes into it, and honestly, the effort pays off because we know what we know about our wintering waterbirds because of all the effort that's been put in by these people since the winter of 94 and 95. So it's a really important long-term monitoring scheme, and thanks to all those who are attending that take part and are just such good supporters and custodians of these wetland sites. So the survey aims to determine the size of waterbird populations, identify then based on those population estimates which sites are most important for them, and assess how their numbers and their distribution is changing over time. And all that goes into informing important decisions then, as I mentioned, like designating special protected areas. Oh, sorry, the slides have not been keeping up with me. Getting to know waterbirds, then how do you go about it? That's a little bit of a background of the survey that I come from, that I'm undertaking, and a lot of how we know about how our waterbirds are faring now. But in order to monitor the birds, you obviously need to know what species are what. So I thought it'd be nice to maybe take a quick view of our core species that we monitor through iWebs and some of the tips, because I know they can be a really overwhelming group of birds, but that shouldn't stop you getting out and getting to know them better, because it's such a nice thing to do, spend your time on during the winter. Identifying waterbirds, it is tricky. It's tricky to learn. In my opinion, all birds are tricky to learn, and what it comes down to really in my mind is practice, a lot of patience, and information actually really helps. You might not think it, but knowing bits about birds, their habitats, what they like to eat, it can actually inform a lot about what you're looking at and help you to eliminate species that it might not be. With the godwits, for example, there are really tricky confusion species, bar-tailed godwit and black-tailed godwit, but black-tailed godwit feed on mud as opposed to sandy substrates. So you might find them on grassland sites, but you'll never find bar-tailed godwits on grassland sites because they feed on sandy substrates. You will find them both together on the same kind of substrates, but you'll never find the bar-tailed godwits on grassland. So that's just a little example of how knowing a little bit about their ecology, about their behavior, can actually help you figure out what kind of bird you're looking at. So my suggestion would be to, yes, look in your guide. The likes of the Collins guide is great, and that Helm guide that's shown there covers confusion species quite well. They have lots of like really great tips on identifying birds, but when it comes to ecology and learning about the work that goes on with birds, if you're part of iWeb, certainly keep up to date with iWeb's news. But if you're not, or regardless of whether you're in iWebs or not, Wings magazine, which is a quarterly magazine for Birdwatch Ireland members, is a great resource for Irish specific information that you won't really get anywhere else. And obviously becoming a Birdwatch Ireland member not only gives you access to this great resource, but also helps support our really important work in protecting birds and their habitats and any associated biodiversity. When you're out in the field, never be afraid to use the guide. You know, there's no shame. It's not like you have to get to a certain point and knowing birds and then you have to put away the guide for shame. It can be there with you forever. I'm sure some of the most seasoned birders still pull it out from time to time. And a bonus tip then is to link up with others. If you can go out with someone else more experienced, in my own personal experience, bird watchers and people who are enthusiastic about nature in general, especially here in Ireland, are really willing to share their knowledge. And it's such a good way to learn from other people, pick up the things that they have learned over the years that help them identify species. And the branches, the 30 or so branches that Andrew mentioned earlier, are a great way to do that because they have outings, they have talks, and are just generally a great bunch of people. So when it comes down to actually figuring out what you're looking at, one of the things in terms of practice, and it comes back to the point of practice, is getting used to the general impression that a bird gives you based on its kind of size and shape and its mannerisms. Birders call this bird's jizz, and it's actually something we do all the time. We are all often getting familiar with objects and things without even really knowing it, and then you can identify what that is without even thinking about it. So really it's just building up to that point. It can seem overwhelming at the start when you're looking at a book of all these gray waders. They're all pretty much the same size, but if you just get to grips with some of the more common species, get used to those, and then you'll find you can pick out a redshank without even thinking about it, just because of the jerky way it moves. And from there, then the other things start to fall into place over time. Obviously, this slide is just to demonstrate the fact that you can already identify things just by their shape. You get used to things just by their general shape and size. I have no doubt that everybody had copped that was a pear, an apple, and a banana. And yeah, like you will often see birds silhouetted anyway, but getting used to their not just the finer details of their plumage, but also just the general way they move, it will really stand to you. And it's useful as well to know that birds are shaped the way that they are, and everything is shaped the way that it is for a reason. Form is connected to the function. So the way that their bill operates and is needed to be used for the type of prey that they have, the type of prey that they eat, or the food that they eat. It's all specifically tied to their ecology. This is a quick demonstration of that. And you'll see it with the smaller birds as well, like finches that eat seeds have quite thick bills so that they can crack seeds. Insectivores have skinny little bills to get in between the cracks in the trees. So it's useful to just note those kind of things as well, and build that into your little library of facts that you'll be keeping in your mind now that you're starting to profile the different waterbird species. We'll start off with the swans, nice and big, obvious, beautiful birds. The mute swan is one you will see all over Ireland and most wetlands, and our wintering species is actually the same as our resident species. So they stay with us all year round. And the big thing with mute swans is the black on the forehead, and their bill is orange. Whereas hooper swans, or the yellow-billed swans, they don't have the black on the forehead. They have black at the end of the bill, and they have this vibrant yellow wedge on the bill. And partly because they're lacking that black knob at the base of their bill, the head looks a bit more kind of evenly sloped as well. Hooper swans, you often see them in big flocks on grassland sites, especially inland, on inland counties. Another, the confusion species for hooper swan is Buick swan, which also has, mute swan, the hooper swan. So you'll see that the yellow wedge on the hooper swan extends right down beyond the nostril. It goes whoop, right down beyond the nostril. And you'll often see them on grassland sites. The Buick swan then is the confusion species. The neck is a little smaller, and the wedge of orange doesn't go as far. It stops short of the nostril, and that's the key difference between them. And you won't have to worry too much about confusing these species, because Buick swans have actually declined a lot in recent times. They used to be the more numerous of the two, and hooper swans were only found in small numbers, but the script has flipped, and this is partly because climate change is warming sites closer to their breeding grounds in Northeast Europe, Russia, etc. And they're just not coming as far as Ireland anymore. It's on the edge of their range. So because these other sites are opening up and not covered over in ice anymore, they don't have to come quite as far. But the population as a whole internationally is declining as well, unfortunately. And hooper swan, I have great numbers of them now, and they seem to only just be going up and up, and these come to us from Iceland. So they're really lovely sight, and you'll hear them honking often when they fly overhead or even in the fields. And often you might see the bodies of white up in the field, and for a second mistake it as a flock of sheep. So it's always worth taking a second look and making sure there isn't a flock of hoopers there. And for the geese, it shouldn't be too challenging. There's not a huge amount of species that you will have to decide between, especially because they're not all found in the same kind of habitats. But in general, some people divide them up into grey geese and black geese. So the grey geese are pink-footed goose. It's quite a nice, neat head, really like kind-looking goose. And you can see the pink on the bill and the pink legs, and it has quite a dark chocolatey colored head. Whereas Greenland white-fronted goose then has orange bill. It has the white around the base of the bill, hence the white front. And it also has this black barring on the underbelly and those orange legs, which will be the giveaway. So the white front and the barring is really what you're looking for with these species. And again, their numbers, they've gone locally extinct in a lot of places. Their numbers have drastically reduced. We're still really important for hosting a big portion of the population of Greenland white-fronted geese, but most of them are now found in the Wexford slobs, which is a stronghold for them. Grey-lag geese, on the other hand, then, of which we have both feral and wild populations. The feral populations are ones that have stayed here and naturalized over time, so we'll be here all year round. But we do still have Icelandic and migrating species as well. But as you can see, the difference between them and the white fronts, they're a little bit grayer. They don't have the barring on the belly, and they don't have that white front at the base of the bill. Just to see them side by side there, lacking the white at the base of the bill and the barring on the belly. You can see them pink-footed goose. I always think they look a little bit kinder and neater, and definitely those kind of darker colors help give them away as well. And for the black geese, so these are Brent geese, Canada geese, and barnacle geese. They all have black on the head. Brent goose, really lovely species. They capture the hearts of so many, especially in the likes of cities where they tend to come quite close to people. They're quite trusting of people and can be found even in amongst housing estates and things like that. They come from Canadian, the high Arctic in Canada, so quite a tremendous way to go to spend winter with us. So we're very privileged. And they first land in Strangford Lough in their thousands, and as the winter goes on, they make their way around the coast. But these are a coastal bird, so you're less likely to find them in the too far inland. They do some supplementary feeding on grassland sites because these their preferred diet is on aquatic plants like eelgrass, but then when that's covered over by the high tide, or when they've grazed it down to a nub, they tend to go into terrestrial sites. Everything from pitches to, the greens in estates to supplement their feeding, so that they can still build up their energy as much as possible. But terrestrial grass doesn't provide them with as much energy as the eelgrass, so that will always be their preference. But it does seem to have helped their numbers come back up after they had a drastic decline in the past, that they switched to feeding on terrestrial grasses as well. Sorry, this is a juvenile Brent. You can see that there's the barring on the back, and the white collar isn't as prominent as it is in the adult bird. You can see it's quite bright there in the adult bird. So Brent geese have lovely dark jet black soot, actually where the word Brant or Brent comes from. They have that kind of very dark head and neck, with light belly, hence the name, and a bit grayer on the back. Whereas barnacle geese then, which will also be found on the coast, but their range is much more reduced, and you primarily find them up in the north west of the country. Sites like Donegal is really good for it. If you're ever up in Malin Head, you'll get some really nice views of big barnacle goose flocks. But as you can see with barnacle geese, they have a white on the face. They have a lovely little neat bill like Brent goose does, but they have this big white face. That's a really big giveaway. The underbelly is also very pale white. And then Canada geese, they're much browner than the other. They do have black head and neck, but they're much browner in the back. These are a naturalized species as well, and you'll find them mostly in kind of inland lakes would be where you would see the biggest concentrations of them. But as you can see, they do have white on the face, but it's only the chin strap, and as opposed to the whole face being white. So have a little quiz for yourself. I won't get you to it right in because there's a lot of people, but just see if you can remember the different species of swan there. It'll take a minute. We have A is mute, that orange bill. Hooper, the wedge, swoops right down beyond the nostril, and Buick swans, much more reduced. There's only about, the last swan census, there was 12 Buick swans found in the country. So you should really get out and see them while you can, because they may very well be extinct from Ireland soon. They will certainly be possibly a rarity in Ireland soon. And Wexford Slobs again is a good place for them as the stronghold. And test yourself with the geese that we just had. The Brent goose, which just has the white collar. Canada goose, the white chin strap. And barnacle goose, a white face. And then on to the, oh, sorry. Ooh. I'm just after drawing in the text. I'm going to stop sharing because for a moment, take a breather, digest what you've learned there. It's not sharing for me the same that it is for everyone else. So I'm ending up going ahead without realizing. This is just a note screen again, is it, that you can see?
This is the...
Or can you see the slideshow?
You can see the slideshow, Brent, Canada, barnacle.
Okay.
And now we're on ducks.
Ducks, okay. It's the same as before.
But it's full screen.
It's full screen, okay. So yeah, ducks, which will be somewhat familiar to everybody, but you might not know quite the extent of duck species that we have here. And one of the good things to get your eye in on or get your head around with ducks is, and look out for, is whether they're dabbling. So whether they upend, their little bums up in the air when they're feeding, or surface feeding, maybe skimming the surface, or whether they're diving right down under the water to get their food, because this will immediately help you to divide into two different groups: the dabbling ducks and the diving ducks. And also then, if you're at a lake, location is also a really good thing to take into account. If you're at a lake, you can immediately eliminate sea ducks, or almost immediately. The likes of eider and common scoter, etc., are unlikely, and you're not likely to find them inland. So we'll start off with mallard, which we do have our own resident population of, and you can see them at wetlands and ponds all over Ireland. And they're also the ancestor of the domestic duck, so a very common duck, and so much to the extent that we probably undervalue them, because we do actually get an influx of them from the likes of Russia during the winter, and actually their population has declined quite a lot. So we shouldn't take them for granted. Obviously, you'll know the male quite well. That green head, really kind of handle of the Mary Poppins umbrella, kind of typical duck head, the metallic green, yellow bill, chestnut on the chest, and that white collar as well. And this little curled tail feather, really good to look out for if you're just looking at silhouetted ducks, because that's unique to mallard. Female ducks add a whole other level of complication. They're all lovely drab brown colors, and beautiful in their own individual ways, and provide a nice little challenge for you to get your eye in on. It's useful for birds, for female birds, because they're often the ones left on the nest. It makes them that little bit more discreet and easier for them to hide from predators at nesting sites, but it does make it harder for us to tell them apart. But one of the things that both male and female mallard possess is this blue speculum has heavy white borders. So if you wait for a little while to see a female mallard move, or a female duck move, and they show this bit of blue bordered by white, you can say for sure that it's a female mallard. Widgeon then are actually one of our most numerous wintering ducks, them and teal. So, and you can find them across most of the country. They will also be found feeding on grassland as well as at estuarine sites. So broad spectrum of habitats. And one of the big giveaways is for the male is the chestnut head with that buff stripe on the forehead. And they have just a black eye, which makes them look quite cute and almost teddy bear like, which is one of the things you can pick out with the female as well. In addition to their grey bill with a little bit of black on the end. Obviously for the male, they have this lovely grey colour, white on the flank, and kind of buff pink colour on the chest. All of these things you can see in flight as well. So when you get your eye in it, they are an okay one to pick out, especially that for the males, that buff stripe on the forehead is a great giveaway. But they can actually be surprisingly easy to confuse with teal, which are a bit smaller than them. Teal are very cute little ducks, really petite. They have this teal, also kind of metallic green color on the head. They too have a red kind of chestnut head, but you can see the bill is really neat and cute. If I'm allowed to say cute, but it's really neat on teal, and that the general just kind of petite look to them is often a really good giveaway when you're trying to pick them apart from other species. And this buff bit at the back as well is also a really big help. And you can see with the female, she isn't that distinct, but it's hard to see here, but you can actually, she also has a bit of a patch of teal on the back as well, on the wing. And then there's pintail, which are quite unrivaled. To be honest, in the field, everything can, even when they're really distinct, between distance and bad lighting and wind, etc., there's always an occasion where you can still get confused, even with some of the most outstanding and unique birds. But pintail is a really nice one. It's a beautiful, elegant bird, one of my favorite ducks, certainly. But it's also really nice when you're starting out, because they have these gorgeous chestnut head, the white on the neck. It's really easy to pick out, and of course the males have this big long pinned tail. The female too has that long pin tail, but just it's not as pronounced as in the male. And for me, with pintail, the key thing is they just have this really overall quite elegant look about them. Really, the female is quite soft and elegant. She has quite a long, thin neck, and even the slope down from the forehead to the bill just gives a really elegant overall impression. In Godwall, you won't come across them at too many sites, and yeah, they're not. They don't have any kind of the same obvious features like pintail does. But this kind of like vermiculated look to their feathers is a dead giveaway. And again, the female is is very similar to other female ducks, in particular the likes of mallard. They both have that orange on the bill, but the head shape is a little bit different when you get used to it. Mallard are a bit kind of higher and rounded, more rounded in the forehead, but they also have paler neck, whereas mallard are a bit more kind of buff in the neck. So it's really a matter of getting your eye in on them. Shell duck are another good one, because they're pretty easy to pick apart a lot of the time. They have that lovely chestnut color, but the white will primarily stick out to you. They're a big duck. They're almost goose-sized, so that'll be another factor that'll help you twig the ID, and that strong red on the bill that you won't get on the other ducks. I think they're a really nice one. The other thing that the shell duck might get confused with, if they're tucked away and their heads are tucked under the wing, etc., and all you're kind of is catching your eye at first is the chestnut and the white plumage. But shoveler, well, the pattern of white, oh sorry, shell duck, yes, so sorry, you can see shell duck here with the gorgeous deep red bill, black head, white, and chestnut. It's easy to spot in flight as well. And then with shoveler, yeah, they also have the chestnut and the white, but in a very different placement on the body, very different pattern. But shoveler is another great one to pick out, because they have this big, heavy bill that you won't get anywhere else. And the same with the female, has that big, heavy bill, and they generally have quite a big, stocky look. They keep their head down often, and they're kind of seem a bit more hunkered down in the water, which will be a big giveaway. Diving ducks. Then, so that's they're all the dabbling ducks. And then for diving ducks, one of the more widespread would be a tufted duck, really lovely. Another quite elegant duck, not in the same way as pintail. They have that bold yellow eye is a really big giveaway. And of course, the tuft on the back of their head is also a really big giveaway. Primarily, they're dark black. They've got the grey bill, and then they have white on the flank. Females are not as obviously their plumage. They don't have that black and white color, but they still have that tuft at the back. They still have that same shape, rounded head, the grey bill, and that deep yellow eye. Of course, nature always likes to throw us a curveball, no matter what. They're, of course, not the exception with this deep yellow eye. Golden eye also have that, so it's a good feature to pick out and immediately draw your eye in to a species, and it helps you limit down to just a couple, because if they have golden eyes, you know it's bound to be one of a few species. Golden eye are quite different. they have the white underneath, and the white on the wing is actually in a different pattern as well. But they have this lovely peak to their head. Their head's quite triangular as opposed to the very round head of tufted duck. And you can see with between the females as well, the female has this kind of brown head as opposed to the black on the tufted duck. So they are a confusion species, but you can see even here the difference. Sorry. So the female has this brown head. But you can see here even the difference in the head shape between goldeneye and tufted duck. And another thing to take into account is the wing pattern. So instead, for tufted duck, the white runs along the wing bar, but in tufted duck, it's a very different placement on the wing. Pochard, another diving duck, but it has declined. Pochard have declined a lot, 70% in fact. So massive declines, and they've been much harder to find these days. A lot of the inland lakes would have been the places to find them, but they've their numbers have reduced a lot, and the diving ducks in general have declined quite significantly. Pochard is gorgeous. Bird has a red eye, chestnut head, black on the breast, and then quite pale grey on the back, and a lovely slope to the head with grey, a pattern of grey on the bill too. Females are not as outgoing as is generally the case with ducks, but they have all those similar characteristics, and this lovely rufous brown color and the slope to the head. You can see in the backs of mallard and the backs of mallard and pochard might cause some confusion, and their head shape's not too dissimilar, but as you can see, the head shape is so the head color are completely different. And again, pochard has this quite steep slope from the forehead down to the bill, which is a good way to spot them at a distance. And same for when you're picking them apart. Tufted duck and pochard, you see tufted duck has a really rounded head, pochard has this steep gradient going down. And you might be thinking, is she cracked? These birds obviously look totally different, but you'd be surprised that in the field they're not always as easy to pick apart. You have the three species here: the mallard, pochard, tufted duck, and some coot thrown in as well, just for good measure. So yeah, it's not always as easy, which is it's good to remember that when you're starting out, because you would think that you're just being dumb, not being able to tell a red-headed duck from a green-headed duck. But yeah, chances are pretty much everybody who knows their birds has been there at some stage. And another confusion species for tufted duck then is scaup, which also has this yellow eye. As you can see, they don't have the tuft at the back of the head, which is a big giveaway. They don't have this grey bill, and the grey on the back is the big giveaway for them. They do have this kind of streaky vermiculated pattern on the back, but it's not always as obvious. But if it's greyish and white on the back, you should certainly twig your attention, make you take a second look and see if it's scaup, because this is something that's absent in tufted duck. And then between the females of tufted duck and scaup, again, not too dissimilar. There is a bit of vermiculation on the back of scaup as well in the females, but won't always be obvious if you don't have a good look. But the white at the base of the bill is a really big giveaway. And that brings us to the end of the ducks, but just to say it's worth getting to know your terminology. I was trying not to use this because I want to keep, not to get too technical on this, but because I want to keep it a nice and friendly level and not scare anyone away. But it is useful to get to know the different parts of a bird, so that you can pick up on what they're talking about in the guidebooks. This is Gargany, isn't one of her. And then yes, so some of our more different ducks would be the saw-billed duck, red-breasted merganser. There's not that many of the birds that you will confuse it with. As I said, there's always an exception to the rule. There's always one little curveball thrown in there. But mergansers are great. They're that bit bigger and more elongated than usual ducks. This the long, narrow bill and the shaggy feathers at the back of the head will be a giveaway for them, even with the females, which are a bit more drab. And you also have goosander, which again you can judge it based on location. Will often be a giveaway because goosander are that's a female red-breasted merganser, sorry, and then you can see in comparison to the female goosander, which primarily has the brown head and then more grey on the body and the back, and has a bit more of a hook at the end of the bill as well. But goosander will be found primarily in Donegal and some in Carlow and Wicklow as well, especially during the breeding season. They are here for the breeding season as well, but they are not very widespread nor numerous. So by and large, you will be seeing what you're looking at will usually be a red-breasted merganser, but you might be lucky and definitely double check your guide just to make sure. As you can see with the male goosander, then the head, the back of the head is a bit smoother. It doesn't have this shaggy, just got out of bed look that the red-breasted merganser have, and the lovely buff color. The head is nice and kind of green, more so than black as well. Common scoter are another nice one. You probably are very unlikely to get as good a view as this of a common scoter because they're a sea duck and usually they're out quite far, and you have to keep your eye on the waves because the rafts will just reappear and disappear. Other than the other less common scoters and vagrants, there's not that much else that you are likely to confuse it with. Gorgeous, quite low to the water blackbirds, this heavy yellow bill, look a little bit like they've had their nose broken a few times, but gorgeous jet blackbirds. An eider, also a sea duck, and again one that you're not likely to confuse with much else. They have gorgeous black on the head and the shape of the bill as well. If even without their very unique patterning on the males, the shape of the bill is really unique. With the female there, so the female doesn't have that many standout defining features, but the general shape be a dead giveaway because none of the other female ducks have that same shape, head and bill. Long-tailed duck, then another one you will not see, a sea duck that you will not see in big numbers, always causes some excitement when they do turn up. Again, like the pintail, they have a long tail, but like the streamers are much longer in long-tailed duck, males that is. But they're still the kind of soft rounded shape of the bill and the general shape of their head, kind of like low flat, and the white the high abundance of white, you're unlikely to mix them up with much else. So that's it for the majority of the ducks. And just to say that, yeah, it really doesn't need to be intimidating going through the process of identifying what you're looking at, because with those few tricks, you'll be easily able to narrow it down. So if you see a red-headed, a brown-headed duck, for example, and you're wondering what it could be, well, that instantly narrows you down to just a few species: male pochard, female goosander, female red-breasted merganser, widgeon, or teal. Just a handful of species. When you watch it for a while and see what it's doing, if it's surface feeding, then that limits you to just 2 species, widgeon and teal. Then you spot that buff stripe on the forehead, and whoopah, you've got your ID clinched. You know it's a widgeon. So it takes time to build up your knowledge of these species over time, but when you add these little bits of information to your library bit by bit, the process becomes much quicker. So just to demonstrate there in pictures, you could have a male teal, male widgeon, female goosander, female red-breasted merganser, or a male pochard. But you should come upon your decision quite quickly. So, quiz time. Just have a check in with yourself there to see if you can figure out what these birds are. We've got a nice elegant one. We've got one with a blue speculum and a very heavy bill. And this is, of course, pintail, mallard, and shoveler. And then for the males, do you think you would be able to pick them out if you saw them as just silhouettes? Can you match which is 1, 2, and 3? One has a long tail, one has those little curled tail feathers, and the other, again, a big, heavy bill, quite a stocky shape. So, of course, number 1 was pintail, 2 mallard with those curled tail feathers, and shoveler with the big, heavy bill. That's it for the ducks. And then the group that we call the Wildfowl Allies covers grebes, coots, rails, heron, cormorant, and divers. I know I said I'd focus mostly on the wintering species, but I just wanted to show the contrast, because it is quite a great contrast between great-crested grebe, summering great-crested grebe, and winter. Still, you will be able to pick them out by this sword-shaped bill and the long shape, the long neck. But you might get either end of the breeding season seeing great-crested grebes as well, where they have the big display feathers on the crown. Beautiful species. And the same for little grebe. You may come across them either side of the breeding season, dipping into the winter months with the red patch that they have during the summer. But by and large, they're quite drab little dab chicks, cute but gorgeous. They always thrills me a bit to see little grebe. They're very small. I led a talk during the summer and people thought that they were ducklings, didn't notice that they were adult birds themselves. They too have quite a spear-shaped bill, although much smaller, because they also eat fish like great-crested grebe. And Slavonian grebe, then, you can see it has the white on the face and the red eye, and is a bit more is blacker than the little grebe. They're less common, but you certainly might come across them. For moorhen and coot, they can be found in quite a lot of places, quite a lot of wetlands across the country, and will often be found in similar habitats. and by all intents and purposes are similar in shape and size. But two of the big giveaways for these species are the coot has this white bill and shield on the forehead, whereas in moorhen, the shield is red, as is the bill, and they have the yellow tip on the end as well. Also, you can see in the moorhen, they have a bit more brown on the back. Water rail is another one of the rails, but is kind of out there on its own a little bit more. The long bill and the grey on the head and chest and underparts, and kind of mottled brown black back. They're all quite unique to this rail. So you might not have trouble picking it apart from other species, but you will have trouble seeing it because they are very discreet, and even for people who have been watching birds for a long time, they may have heard them many times or seen a little flash of them, but not actually got a really good view, like this photographer managed. So a good one to look out for if you're lucky enough to see it. They can sound quite like a pig squealing. So if you're wondering why there's a pig in the rushes, you might want to keep your eyes out for a water rail. Grey heron then, again, quite out there on its own, very large birds, can be found on a lot of our wetland sites all across the country. Quite oriental looking birds, and they have this big long spear shaped bill because they're adapted for fishing primarily. They will also eat a wide range of things, frogs and chicks and rats. But yeah, they stand very still in the water often, or at the water's edge, or might just be craning around in the water in search of food. And when you see them in flight, they look prehistoric often. They're really big wingspan. The neck is tucked in, and they look like some kind of pterodactyl or something. So fabulous birds. A little egret too. They're also a heron cousin. We didn't have them in Ireland not too long ago. They first were found breeding here in the early 90s down in the southwest, and since then they have spread around the coastal sites and are now spreading to the inland sites. So they're becoming more and more numerous all the time. The trend for iWebs is like more than 1,000% increase or something silly like that, because they weren't here at the start of the survey. So it's great. It's great to see this natural kind of colonization and increase like that happen over time. And one of the big things, we do get other egrets here, cattle egret and great white egret sometimes are in small numbers, but the big thing to look for are the yellow feet with little egret. And then we have cormorant, again, quite a prehistoric looking bird, especially as they have kind of the brown on their feathers make them look somewhat scaly. But they have this white on the face, the bare skin on the lower mandible around the base of the bill, and a strong hooked bill. So often they're quite easy to pick out. The jet blackbird, quite large. They can fly. They do fly in when they fly in flocks. They're in formation, so they can look like geese. So you look out for this kink in the neck when you see them flying. And also then when you see them in the water, they usually have their bill pointing upwards when they're swimming, which is another giveaway. Whereas the shag, the confusion species, doesn't keep its head up quite as high. They're generally kind of smaller and more snake-like, though admittedly they are difficult, especially when you're starting out. They are very difficult to tell apart. One of the things to note is if you're seeing it inland, it won't be a shag, because shag are seabirds, whereas cormorant are a bit more generalist. They breed more typically on coastal sites, but they are also known to breed in trees, and their guano actually is acidic, and eventually they will kill the tree that they nest in from their excrement falling on the tree. And cormorant fish as well, and they're happy to fish inland. So they have, they have been found inland for a long time now, whereas shag are strictly coastal. So you can see they have the narrow bill, they have a slender neck, and they're just generally kind of smaller and slimmer. A common term is this, that they're a bit more snake-like than cormorant. And I think that a large part of that is the lack of bare skin around the eye. The difference in the eyes, I think, makes the shag look a bit more snake-like to me, in addition to the kind of slimmer, narrower shape. Then red-throated diver, they too kind of hold their head up at an angle, which is something you might help you spot them or pick them out. They're often found out in the open sea, so it's good to look and look again, because there can be a lot more birds out in the open water than you'd think. But red-throated diver, they have the spear shaped bill, they hold up quite high, but in comparison to the great northern diver, they're a lot more slender. They're a lot more slender in the neck and the head, a good narrow head, whereas great northern diver are big birds. They have a lot more black plumage, and the head has this bump that you'll see. And you usually spot that just in general, the difference between how kind of big and stocky a great northern diver is. And then we have the waders, which I think are often commented to be quite a difficult group to get your head around. Again, it's all a process of elimination, and just kind of narrowing down to your pool of possibilities. An additional thing, in particular with waders, that you want to take into account is the bill length and the leg length, and leg color can be a good marker as well with waders. Again, general shape and structure is a big help, and considering where it is and what it's doing. Curlew, one of the biggest, is the biggest wader you'll come across here. They're very big, the body, we refer to them as being turkey-like, and they have this big, long, down-curved bill. So you'd think that nothing really rivals them, but in fact we also have a confusion species for curlew, the whimbrel. Whimbrel is not here all of the time. It's a passage migrant, but you can get the flocks of the two of them mixed in together. So the big thing to look out for is the crown stripe on the head of whimbrel, and this eye stripe, the supercilium. So the other thing is that the bill can be a good deal shorter on whimbrel than it is on curlew. However, juvenile birds or female birds with smaller bills can also make that a bit harder to pick out. So really, for me, it's about the crown stripe and the eye stripe, or the lack thereof, in curlew. Whimbrel are a bit neater and smaller as well, and for some people who have been surveying birds for a long time, they don't think they're anything like, because they've got their eye in on them to that extent. They know them so well. But yeah, when starting out or when the conditions aren't great, it can be quite difficult pick them apart. As I said, whimbrel are passage migrants, so they just pass through in autumn or late winter and early spring on their way to or from Africa. And they have been, their route has been tracked, and on the autumn route, they have been known to just go straight from Iceland all the way down to Africa non-stop. Quite a hefty journey. But then often on the way back to Iceland, they will stop off for a little refuel in Ireland. Two of the really big head wreckers are the godwits that I mentioned at the top end of the talk. And as I said, bar-tailed godwit feed on sandy substrates, so they'll be you will not find them on grassland sites, whereas black-tailed godwits, which feed on muddy substrates, you can find them on grassland sites too. The big thing that will often catch my eye for the difference between them is that black-tailed godwit are quite plain. They have this lovely buff grey colour throughout, whereas bar-tailed godwit are streaked in their plumage. They are also a bit smaller than bar-tailed godwit. The legs are, bar-tailed godwit are smaller than black-tailed godwit. Blacktails have longer legs, and in general, I think this makes them look a lot more elegant. And they're very buff, kind of consistent look to their plumage. Sometimes when black-tailed godwits are feeding, they have this quite stilted look that makes them look like they might overbalance a bit easier than bar-tailed godwit as well. Some people like to use the trick that because black-tailed godwit have longer legs, you could fit the letters BLACK between their false knee and the body, whereas with bar-tailed godwits, smaller bird, smaller word, you could only fit BA or. And it's not so obvious in this picture, but bar-tailed godwit do also have a bit of an up curve to the bill, whereas for black-tailed godwit, it's very long and straight. And then also, if they're really wrecking your head, or the conditions are just not allowing you to see the difference in their plumage, or they're maybe eclipsing into different stage, they're in between wintering and breeding plumage, a great thing to look out for is the black on the tail. If there's black on the tail, it's a black-tailed godwit. As if there's bars on the tail, it's a bar-tailed godwit. Also, black-tailed godwit with their longer legs, the toes tend to stick out, project beyond the tail. They also have a white rump and a broad white wing bar that are not present in the bar-tailed godwit. The white extends a little bit further up a bar-tailed godwit's back, and they don't have any wing bar. So once you get your eye on those few little things, it becomes easier. Still challenging in a lot of counts that we do, depending on the conditions. Light is often against you and things like that. But over time, it certainly becomes a lot more obvious, and something that you can pick out just by their general shape and size. Oyster catcher are really great species. Just in lots of ways, but they are kind of medium size between well, they're a big bird, but they are a little bit smaller than the godwits, but bigger than redshank. They have this piebald kind of black and white contrast that you won't see in other wader species, and the bright orange bill. Some people call them carrot bills, and they're called carrot bills in some places, and the orange legs and this stark red eye. So they're a really nice one to be able to pick out, even when they're kind of flocked together, the likes of redshank. Redshank is actually probably my top pick as the wader species that you should become familiar with, so that you can compare all others against it. It's a nice medium size. It has very jerky movement when it walks, which is easy to pick out regardless of the conditions in which you're watching it. They have orange bill and orange legs. And I won't lie to you, when they're roosting and their heads are tucked in and you can't see their legs, they do still just look like a grey wader. But over time, they're just an easier one to get your head around, because when you are watching them out and about, they just have all these little markers that you can pick up on and use then to compare them to other species to them. A similar quite a similar species, another shank, is the green shank, which does give a quite similar overall impression. The bill shape is similar, although it's longer in green shank, but they're altogether paler. Paler legs, more of a greeny grey color, brilliant white on the breast and under parts, and a bit darker on the back, that not that kind of consistent dull grey that red shank are. Another way you can tell them apart is in flight. You can see the toes stick out, so you might spot the little orange toes of the red shank. But also notice how the white wedge goes up the back, and there's white on the wing as well, which is absent in green shank. Notice the pattern of white on their back as well in flight. Oh, someone's drawing on my presentation. Then stop and share again. Yeah, is that better? The blue gone?
Yeah, it's on. It's not on play mode yet.
Oh, it's not on play.
No, we can see the background and the.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. Rough.
Great, rough. So just make sure. Yeah, so we left it at green shank versus red shank in flight, and then just to mention rough, which are another passage migrant, and just a warning, so they can look similar to red shank, but a warning that their appearance can vary a lot. The males are approximately a third bigger than females, which are known as reeves. Males being slightly larger than red shank, while females are actually closer to Dunlin size. So it's quite a range, as you can imagine. Their leg color can be yellow, dull, greenish yellow, orange, or red. The bill can be all dark or showing various amounts of red or orange. And one of the things you might notice in flight, they have a floppy kind of wing beat. Seems almost kind of lazy, is one of their characteristics. And they also have this scaly, scalloped look to the back feathers. And the head and bill seem kind of small in comparison to the rest of the bird for birds this size. And those are the kind of things that might just flag to you that you're looking at something that's not a red shank or not something familiar. And lapwing, another really fabulous bird, not only because it has this gorgeous iridescent look to the wing feathers to the back. They also have this little like punk look going on with their long feathers at the back of the head. They're around pigeon-sized birds. can see the bill as you get to know the different waders. They have quite a plover typical bill that kind of rounded at the end, not very long, not too short, but rounded at the end. But a great thing about lapwing as well is that they have these wide, almost square type wings that are really easy to pick out in flight. When you see them wheeling around in the sky, it can often be really easy to pick them out, which is great. And then some of the other plovers you'll come across are might be golden plover and grey plover, which are related, and they're very similar, but obviously one is grey and one is golden. There is a little bit of a size difference as well. Grey plover a little bit bigger. As you can see, golden plover look a little bit more happier, innocent. Grey plover are often out on their own, or you can get them in flocks, but even when they're in groups, they don't tend to huddle together the way the golden plover do. They're very solitary birds, and it is much more grey and pale than golden plover. They, to me, always look, grey plover to me always look very suspicious the way they're standing out on their own. In part, that's because they're visual feeders and they will stand there waiting until they see prey and then waddle over to them and pick it up. But they always kind of look like they're scanning around, suspicious of their surroundings. So yeah, generally grey plover is just a bit bulkier, and the head and bill, and yeah, golden plover then a little bit neater. But one really big giveaway, if you're really having trouble picking them apart, or you think you have spotted a grey plover in amongst the golden plovers, wait until they take flight, and then you'll see that it's the pits. The armpits or axillary feathers are dark in grey plover, whereas they're all white in golden plover. So if you see those black armpits, you know without a shadow of a doubt they are grey plover. And the last of our plover, the very cute little, very cute ringed plover. I do have a habit of saying little ringed plover, but that's a different species. So just ringed plover, very neat, smaller than the other birds, but quite unique in their patterning. They have orange legs, orange bill with the black tip. They have that black collar, black patterning around the eye, and the soft kind of grey color with the white underbelly. In flight, you're able to pick out the characteristics of the white on the face and the black collar as well. And also another thing to look out for is those white wing bars. Dunlin, small, lovely bird to see. You will often see them in quite good numbers at estuarine sites, coastal sites. But yeah, by all accounts, for people starting out, it is very difficult to pick apart Dunlin and Dunot, and sometimes the other species as well, and a lot of the kind of vagrants that will be hard to separate them from. In winter, they're a bit more drab, kind of grey. Midwinter, you'll see them kind of more in drab grey colours. But they have this kind of crisp, clean white on the underbelly. And yeah, the confusion species then is the knot. And then when you see these one after the other, they don't seem maybe as alike. One of the things to look out for knot, if you can see their legs, is the green kind of yellow leg color, and the white supercilium of the eye. But the a key thing to look out for between the two of them are the proportions, not just the fact that not are bigger, but also that the head to bill ratio is quite different, the two of them. For Dunlin, the bill is a lot longer in proportion to its head, whereas it's the other way around for Knot. The head is bigger than the bill. And then my favorite of the waders, which again, they're similar size to Dunlin, so, and they're kind of just like grey on the back and white underneath. So when they're tucked up and roosting, can be difficult to pick apart, but Sanderling are quite brilliant. They're quite brilliant white color. And they also have this kind of distinct mannerism, the way that they run back and forth along the water's edge. Some people have likened them to one of those machines in the arcade, the coins going in and out, because they will just chase along the tide line in this really hurried fashion. So again, it's just an example of where looking out for behaviors and getting to know these different behaviors can help a lot. So again, if you think about a possible process of elimination, you have a small wader on the beach, you're instantly kind of limited to anything, certainly anything smaller than a redshank. So there might be Sanderling, Knot, Dunlin, purple sandpiper, turnstone, or ring plover. But they're on the beach, so that eliminates like purple sandpiper for you, because purple sandpiper are found on kind of rocky coastlines, and you can look for orange legs then if they don't have orange legs, which purple sandpiper and ring plover and turnstone do. Then it limits your list a little bit more. And if they're, you might think, are they smaller than Knot, and then that knocks Knot off your list. And then you see them do this little hurried run along the shoreline, and that's the thing that could just be the difference that clinches the ID for you. Always look like they're late for something. Turnstone again, brown on the back, white underneath. A lot of them have that kind of this similar pattern of brown on the back and white underneath, but turnstone's a bit deeper in color, and the brown colors look a little bit more mottled. As they're insectivores as well, you can see this kind of like quite pointed bill, and they have quite a brilliant orange to the legs as well. You can often find them, turnstone are invariably undercounted and under-recorded because they have really good camouflage, and they're often just along the rocks or on the seaweed. One of the things that might highlight you to their presence is the flicking. If you just see seaweed being flicked up in the air, it's probably a turnstone. So have a second look. You might see them running around picking up the insects from the seaweed. And yeah, just keep an eye out for them on the likes of rock armor and stuff as well. They can be very easy to miss, but worth a look. And as well, then on rocky coasts, have a look for purple sandpiper, which also have these orange legs, kind of a more muted shade of orange than in turnstone. The bill is also, as you see, it's a bit more like redshank, if you will. It's a bit longer. It does have a bit of a down curve to it, and it's orange and black. And they're just a bit more overall kind of grey and brown in comparison to the turnstone. And just a mention for snipe as well. Again, another very secretive bird, like water rail. You might not see them very often. You often won't see them out in the open. But notice the head to bill ratio in snipe, where they have a really long bill for the size of the bird. Also this lovely light brown, but with the the streaking of dark brown right through to the eye, down to the bill, and on the crown of the head. And you see the darker brown on their backs as well. You won't often, you'll probably hear them before you see them, and they may just frighten the life out of you as you're walking through a field and they erupt from the grass. They'll let you know they're there, but they often do this zigzag pattern as they fly away, an evasive maneuver. And yeah, if you see that flight pattern, it's a snipe. Another bird, which is potential confusion species for snipe, is woodcock. As you can see, the head is that little bit, got a bit of a higher forehead, and the eye is very large as well. The patterns of the brown, patterns of brown on the forehead is very different as well. You've got that steep forehead, and they're that bit more mottled in the plumage on their back. And then similarly for, as I mentioned with the ducks, there's lots of these technical terms. As you get deeper and deeper into bird identification, or even just as you're perusing the guide, you might see these terms being used. It's useful to get to know your bird anatomy a little bit as well. I know I'm heavily emphasizing the learning aspect and picking up of information in this talk, but it really does just help you appreciate what you're looking at, and the different elements, and in understanding all those little bits about birds, ecology, and their habits will help it make a lot more sense in time. And size is an important thing to take into account as well. As I mentioned, the Dunlin will be at the smaller end, not are that bit bigger. And then you'd have the likes of golden plover, lapwing for context, or about pigeon size. Red shank, green shank are that bit bigger than them, and godwits are quite big. In between curlew and red shank, and curlew would be the biggest. But a word of warning that size can sometimes be misleading depending on your surroundings and whether the bird is quite far away or not, and what it is beside. If you can get two birds directly beside each other by chance, that's a great way to compare size, and it will often be a really good indicator of the group of species you might be looking at, but just do be aware that it can be misleading at times as well. And the final group we have are the gulls then. Gulls are another group that are quite intimidating for people. And I can understand why, but certainly as you start to break them down a bit, they do become easier. This will just focus on the adult birds. For a lot of gulls, they go through various juvenile stages. Some are in juvenile plumage for 4 years until they come into their adult plumage. But again, once you get a sense of their general shape and size and what kind of characteristics you're looking out for, it will become easier to tell the juveniles and the more cryptic plumage stages as well. So in general, we can kind of divide gulls into large gulls and small gulls. So the large gulls would be great blackback, lesser blackback, and herring gull, and the smaller would be black-headed and common gull. And Mediterranean gull as well is becoming a bit more widespread. So that might end up in the mix as well. So one to watch out for. And these are the most common of the gulls. We do get some other vagrants turning up, but they are the ones to look out for. So first of all, consider their size. Have a look at the shade of the color on their back. For the large gulls, the shading on the back will often be a clincher, as well as the size. The legs are a good indicator. How heavy the bill is, what shape and color it is, and also what the wing tips are like. All the kind of things you want to look out for with the gulls. So with black-headed gull, see they have this nice neat red, quite deep red bill with a black on the end. They've got black wing tips. Contrary to what their name might indicate, a lot of the times when you see black-headed gulls, they will not have the black hood, their black head, as this is kept just for the breeding season. But they do often have this little bit of black just behind the eye, and sometimes going through the eye as well, like this bird. But they're not, like lovely white color with a pale gray on the back, and the red legs as well are a giveaway. Again, you can see these features in flight too, and you'll see the black on the wingtips. Whereas Mediterranean gull, then they also have red bill, red legs, gray back, white, and they can have a hood, although a deeper hood. It goes in further on them than black-headed gulls. But the key thing with med gulls then is the lack of black on the wingtips. Also, the bill is it's a bit heavier, and the colors differ a little bit. But at the very basic level, if you see a gull with no black wingtips, you got to get your guide out. And then common gulls are also a small bird, a bit bigger than black-headed gulls. They have this kind of pale green of the legs, pale green, yellow color to the bill as well. They again have this kind of just black eye and soft look around it that makes them look a little bit teddy bearish to some people. And also notice they have these windows on the wingtips, which are a giveaway. It's not a solid black wingtip, but instead these white windows are present. You can see the white on the wingtips in flight as well. A great blackback gull, the largest of the large gulls, and in fact the largest of all gulls in the world. Their wingspan is about the same height as I am, which isn't saying much, but really large wingspan, and big, solid, almost mean looking birds. They have a heavy bill, thick heavy bill, pink legs, and a yellow bill with a red dot on it, as all of the large gulls have. But this, yeah, it's important to note the pink legs, because then in the lesser blackback gull, they have yellow legs. Instead of having a jet black back, they have quite a slate gray on the back. The bill is neater and not as thick and heavy as in a great blackback gull. Depending on the light and where you're seeing them, this slate gray can seem darker, or in fact it can seem lighter. So if you see those yellow legs, you're onto a winner with picking them apart from herring gull and great blackback gull. Then herring gull also have the yellow bill with the red dot, although they are much paler gray on the back, much closer to common gull and black-headed gull, that shade of gray. They do have the windows on the wings, and you'll see in the picture as well. But notice they have pink legs, and they are, if you see them certainly in comparison to a great blackback gull, they are a little bit smaller, the smallest of the three. So that's it for the species. I hope it hasn't been too confusing. Just to say that watching waterbirds does become infinitely easier with optics. If you're trying to identify birds with the naked eye, it probably be nigh impossible. So certainly binoculars if you're trying to get into watching water birds, even just those on your local lake, you might see a lot more and in much better detail if you have your image magnified that bit. But certainly a telescope really makes it so much better. And yeah, there's lots of ways to buy optics, both first hand and second hand. It is an investment, but just to say, there are optics for sale in the Birdwatch Ireland shop as well if you want advice when you're starting out. And then just a quick note on what we have found from iWebs of late and our most recent analyses is that total numbers of water birds have unfortunately declined a lot, which you may have picked up on from the few I mentioned that have declined. In just 5 years, we lost 15.5% our total numbers. Waders in particular, as of all the groups, have experienced the largest declines. Sites supporting 20,000 water birds or more in the last review in 2004-2005 was at 15, and it's fallen to just 5 sites now. This is one of the criteria that's used to identify which sites are internationally important for supporting water birds. So we're now down from 15 to 5. And but it's not all bad news. There have been increases in my favorite, sanderling, and greenshank, which is quite an interesting one as well, because anecdotally people were saying greenshank were increasing at their wetlands, even people who weren't necessarily taking part in the survey. And the data has proven that that's true. Almost a 17% increase. And the godwits too are also increasing. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it is certainly not a good picture, because there has been a 40% decline in their total water bird numbers since the start of the survey in 94 and the winter of 94-95, which is massive. And I'm sure it is more now, because that's a few years ago at this stage that the analysis was done. So there's been significant declines in each of the groups, but waders in particular have had quite a steep decline. Wildfowl has been on a bit more of a steady trajectory. All right, there you can see wildfowl versus waders. So that was up until 2016 that this data showed. And there's really large scale declines going on. We know this because the data that is collected through iWebs is also fed into the International Waterbird Survey run by Wetlands International. And as I mentioned, we share these populations with other countries. So it's really important to try and monitor the whole area overall. So the best way to do it is feed the information from these national schemes into the international scheme. So WEBS in Northern Ireland would also feed their information into it. And we know that there have been declines, but there's also been a lot of shifting in range as the climate is warming, birds are moving. As the wetland sites near to their Arctic breeding grounds are becoming warmer and less icy and opening up, birds, it doesn't make sense for them energetically anymore, a lot of them, to come to Ireland, which is right on the edge of their range. They do face some issues with predation as well on their Arctic grounds. As you know, the Arctic isn't the most hospitable environment, especially not with things getting harder and harder over time. So when birds have poor breeding seasons, obviously there's not as many new birds being injected into the population, and not as many of them to come back here to feed and repeat the cycle all over again. Also, just disturbance on the breeding grounds can cause problems too. But it's not just far away that the problem is. There's certainly problems on our doorstep as well. And these large-scale declines, these declines are also furthered by and worsened by habitat loss and deterioration, habitat modification, disturbance. Disturbance is becoming a big problem. And changes in agriculture, changes in the climate, developments, pollution, hard engineering. There's a number of factors at play, but it's like a death by 1,000 cuts. So we might not think that a little bit of disturbance is causing much of a problem to a whole population. But in fact, if birds are being put up and down all the time, they have no time to feed, they're wasting that energy, valuable energy that they have built up from feeding by getting up and flying away from the point of disturbance. And it means they're lowering their reserves all the time for going back and having a successful breeding season. So even if we think it might not be a big thing, it all adds up, and it's just chipping away at the numbers that make it back successfully and breed successfully and then return the next season. So if this is something that you are interested in and passionate about, the fact that these birds are declining and our wetland sites are also being degraded in ways, it's important to tell politicians really that change comes from the big decision makers, knowing that these are things that are important to you, to the people. Supporting Birdwatch Ireland and MPWS and their various initiatives to tackle these problems. It's also really important running local events to tell people about wetlands and maybe sharing your knowledge about the wonders that are found there and some of the problems that face them and ways that we can be more kind to these species. And also to get involved in Birdwatch Ireland branches and maybe the Irish Wetland Bird Survey if you're not already. And speaking of events, World Wetlands Day is coming up on February 2nd, and the Irish Ramsar Wetlands Committee are compiling a list of events. So if you are hosting or running an event at a wetland or would like to, and it could be anything, please register them there or absolutely go along to them just out of interest either. You can find them on the Irish Wetlands website. Thank you for listening, and thank you for, sorry, I did run a bit over time. And thank you for all of the photographers that let us use their photos, which are featured in this talk.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Niamh. Thanks a million for that. And I just have to say, that's not an easy job, teasing out all of the species. But you made it look achievable and easy. But I think you've condensed hours and hours of time in the field into that presentation. So well done. Yeah, I mean, it comes down, it's a lot of time in the field, isn't it? And just teasing out the differences, and it's amazingly satisfying as well as you get to know these species. And yeah, as you can tell the difference, and then it gets slightly easier and easier and easier, and then there's only a few things that trip you up after a while. So thank you very much for that. Shall we fire through some questions? Are you ready? Can you handle it? You want to have a sip of water? And just in the interest of time, we will, so we'll fire through these questions. Niamh, you're muted, so whenever you're ready, I'll...
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Just one thing could you quickly mention, there's a question about the ducks, which are lake ducks and which are sea ducks, and that can be quite interchangeable, can't it? So then they might feed in one place and then go for protection in another. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the likes of tufted duck, you could certainly see them on the sea as well, but there are common scoter and eider would be, and long-tailed duck would be exclusively sea ducks usually. The others might be found on the sea or in estuarine areas, as well as on the sea, but for or on lakes. But for long-tailed duck, eider, and common scoter, they are sea ducks.
Brilliant. Okay, so Connor had a question. Any tips for separating buicks and whooper swans in flight?
Oh, in flight, that's difficult. It'd be a lot harder. To get a really definite ID, you would want to see the wedge. But buicks are that little bit neater, and their necks are a little bit shorter. So when you really get to know them, you might be able to twig that when they're in flight, but certainly harder.
And
chase every flock of hoopers that you see to make sure there's not a buick in it.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, and the flocks are more likely to be smaller than the buicks. But the calls as well. The whoopers call in flight, but they both call in flight probably, do they?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, whooper make that really honking sound. Do you hear them do that typical kind of honking sound that hoopers make? Yeah, that's a good way to go about it as well.
And for winter wader plumage, is climate change having an effect on when the plumage changes?
It's a good question. I haven't noticed it. Yes, I haven't seen any studies to prove that it is. I mean, to my knowledge, we always would have seen a little bit of the breeding plumage kind of still being visible at the start of the winter season and at the end anyway. So I don't think there's a significant shift in that has been noticed or studied as of yet.
Okay. How long does a typical iWebs count take?
It takes typically around 3 hours. It can vary a lot depending on what kind of area you're counting and how many birds are there, how big the site is. Every count is supposed to be done within 3 hours. But you can have a series of inland lakes, and you might spend a day going around to the different sites, or you can have just a sub-site at a coastal site and spend 2.5 3 hours at that. Galway Bay counts, then it's a big undertaking. It takes closer to 6 hours sometimes as well. So there's quite a range, but generally around 3 hours.
Okay. Some questions about curlews. Sean sent one in saying curlews seem to be an all-year resident bird, especially on the Bull Island, yet I'm told they're non-breeding. Silly question, where are our residents from then? So could you just tell us a little bit about curlews?
Yes, so curlew, the complication with this, I'm just going to be annoying for a second and share my screen again if I can.
Yeah.
Is that the wrong one?
No, that's, yeah. Breeding.
Curlew? Yeah.
Yeah, breeding distribution of curlew.
Great. So yeah, this map will have changed a bit from Atlas when it was, the fieldwork was undertaken. I imagine there would be less dots of confirmed breeding areas, but curlew curlew breed on upland areas typically, and their numbers in the breeding season, which is like the summer months, have drastically reduced over the last number of years. So they're closer to 100 breeding pairs at the moment, which is not very many. And part of this is habitat change, habitat reduction, which increases how vulnerable they are to predation, because if they don't have as much luscious habitat around them, then it's much easier for predators like crows and foxes to find the chicks, and they're damned before they even get a chance, before they even get to grow up and experience love, all of that. They don't even get a chance to leave the nest a lot of the time. So there's a lot of work going into that. There's dedicated schemes working with farmers, really enthusiastic farmers, to protect these few sites, and primarily midland areas, and around the Callows would be a good place for them, an important part of the country. But this population, our breeding population, which we would consider to be the Irish birds, are different then to our wintering population, which come from Europe, the likes of France. We get an influx of curlew then, and our own curlew can leave. Some of them might go to Africa for the winter, and these other curlew come in to us. So when you're seeing hundreds of curlew at a wetland site from autumn into spring, they are migrant birds that have come from elsewhere to us, and not our own breeding species. Or some of our own breeding species might be in there, but at most they make up a couple of hundred birds, typically. So yeah, as you can see then from the map, they mostly coastal sites they can be seen, and then their numbers can be quite high at these sites, up to nearly 2,000. And they're seen a lot of inland sites as well, but that is because they have come from Europe to spend the winter with us. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, and there's a question from Anne about the winter curlew. She was wondering if any of them are ringed. Of course, they might be ringed. They mightn't be ringed in Ireland as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ringed birds, a really good thing to look out for. So ringing schemes are a really important way to track our migrating birds' movements. Many schemes will put either a color combination or a color combination with a ring that has been inscribed with a unique code, so each bird can be specifically identified. And then when someone in the field spots that, reports it back to the people who ringed it, they can tell them, oh yeah, that's XY. They were ringed on the nest 3 years ago in France, and that kind of thing. So certainly there will have been curlew ringed in other countries, but we absolutely have ringed curlew here as well in Dublin Bay, and there's a dedicated PhD that was being done on curlew, would have ringed them on locations around the country, and there's probably I think there was a tracking element to that as well, so they would have GPS tracker. So yeah, if you're out in the field and you see a bird with these rings on, certainly keep an eye out. It can be tricky to get the codes, but it's really rewarding.
Brilliant. Trevor had a question about the practicalities of carrying out an iWeb survey on a falling tide.
Yeah, so typically iWebs is carried out on a rising tide. Ideally, for consistency, we try to carry out the count on the same tidal state so that we can get a clear snapshot of where the waterbirds are at any given time. So I mean, in an ideal world, everybody would be there on the same tide at the same time on the same day, but obviously the tides are not the same around the country, so that's not possible anyway. And but it does vary depending on the site, and some sites might the birds might be more it might be more suitable to survey the birds' movements on, you know, just after high tide on a falling tide, or, you know, a little bit in advance of rising. So it depends on the site, and the iWeb's database does have the capacity to take in records from all the different tidal states. It's still good information, but by and large we try to keep it to near the rising high tide so that it's all comparable, and we know they're not just birds from somewhere else. But yet it's certainly possible depending on the site.
Okay, Andrew had a question. He lives outside Tubbercurry in County Sligo, and they have a turlock that always has around 50 swans every winter. We presume it means whooper swans. Is this the furthest west that they fly?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I'm not actually sure if he means, is it the furthest west? Is Ireland the furthest west that they fly? To which the answer would be yes. So our Hooper swans come to us from Iceland, and they yeah, this would be kind of where the westernmost of the East Atlantic Flyway range. But it is not the most western point in Ireland where they would fly. As you can see, this is information. This map is from the International Swan Census from 2020, and the red sites are just where they were recorded, but are of no particular significance. Blue sites are where sites of national importance or numbers of national importance occurred, and green are internationally important numbers. So they'd be in less lower abundance out in the west, but they can occur quite far out.
Yeah, they're right on the edge, aren't they?
Yeah, as you can see, they cover quite a lot of the country now that their numbers have sprung up into the 19,000 bracket.
Yeah, see some in Dublin, North Dublin there.
Yeah, the funny ones to see in Dublin.
What are the most endangered wetland birds in Ireland?
Yeah, good question. So the diving ducks have experienced some of the most drastic declines. Pochard, probably one of the biggest, for just specifically talking about wintering species. Pochard have had really massive declines. And you can see here of over 70% in the long term. And a lot of the diving ducks have been really, really badly hit. Some of that might be short stopping and responses to climate changing, etc. Some of the other ducks aren't doing too well either. Widgeon and teal have had really big declines, and they're our two most numerous duck species. So having big declines in their numbers means a drastic decrease in our overall numbers. So they're quite significant ones as well. Greenland white-fronted goose is in danger because their range has extracted so much. They've gone locally extinct in so many places and are now pretty much just being, there's a population sink into that population in Wexford slobs. So if everything goes topsy-turvy in Wexford slobs, that population might just be scuppered. So it's not great to have all our eggs in one basket. That's quite a vulnerable one. And similarly for Buick swans, we have Buick swans are probably going to be the next ones to go extinct here in Ireland.
Yeah.
A lot of the waders, our wader species as well, that are doing bad. Lapwing not looking great. Golden plover, Dunlin, yeah, and the likes. But Greenland white-fronted geese and Buick swans are probably the most hairy.
Yeah, very stark there. Okay. Lauren lives close to a salt marsh in West Cork, and there's a local farmer who seems to be taking over bits of land around it. And the same thing is happening with the county council with dumping and etc., which is common around the country. Are there any protections in place to preserve these vulnerable areas from destruction?
I mean, it depends on the area, whether it's a special protected area. Obviously, SPAs have a kind of higher level of protection. I mean, it is a difficult issue because a lot of these places are privately owned, and any development, whether it's changing the land use into jumping or farming or what have you. There should be a process that it goes through, you know, an impact assessment and the likes. And if that hasn't been met, there's certainly a case to pull them up on that. But yeah, if the impact assessment has been done and it has been deemed not to have too bad an effect, then there's probably little you can do. But I would say that is a good opportunity to raise it to your local councillors that these issues are really worrying you, and even if everything has been done by the book, you know, they might there might be an ability to lobby locally for this kind of land use change to stop, and to lobby for the protection of those sites.
Okay, so you go straight to the council as a first stop.
Yeah, it does bring it to your local councillors to raise about it.
Yeah. Okay. Brexit question. Does Brexit regulation affect cross-border cooperation in all Ireland counts?
No, luckily it doesn't. There's actually two different schemes. So there's WEBS in Northern Ireland and iWebs in the Republic of Ireland. WEBS has been around for longer, and we actually iWebs is a carbon copy of the methodology of WEBS. So the two collect their data on separate schemes, and then when it comes to time of analysis, we have always had very good relationships with the BTO in the north that do that and share the data then, or request the data and feed it in. The great thing about the schemes as well is that the data is freely available. So when people want to do, studies like those large-scale studies about how climate change is affecting range shifts and things like that, we are able to contribute that data to these schemes as well. They do have to go, if it's a big study, it does have to go through kind of just a little checking process to make sure it's going to be used in the right way. But no, Brexit hasn't had any effect so far, thankfully.
Yeah, brilliant. There's a question about Cape Clear Observatory. Is it open all year round? But not currently.
It's not currently. Yeah, we have a resident warden there, Steve Wing, would you believe? And he does a great job of taking care of the place, but it's not currently open because of COVID. The island are they're playing it quite safe at the moment, because it's it's so easy for a virus to take down an island.
Yeah. Chris had a question about getting involved with bird surveys. So he's looking to make a switch, but how would people get involved who maybe lack the necessary skills?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It depends somewhat on your skill, your current skill level, and your equipment, your resources, and what level you come in at taking part. I always encourage people to get involved with the Birdwatch Ireland branches, their local Birdwatch Ireland branch, if they can. One, because a lot of the branch members take part in our surveys, so they can, and they're just really good at sharing their knowledge. Two, because they have regular outings whereby you will get to see and pick up little ID tricks for these species and get to become more familiar with them. So that's always a good way to get involved. And it's, a lot of the branches do kind of local projects and things like that. It's a really nice way to be involved in conservation and meet like-minded people. And then in terms of how to get involved in surveys themselves, I would the Garden Bird Survey. It might seem quite like small and maybe not as robust as the other surveys, but it's our longest running survey. It's a really good way to get your eye in on birds and just get into the habit of surveying. And you don't need much in order to do it. You can do it with the naked eye. You can do it even if you don't have a big lush green space out your back. It's once you can attract some birds into your garden, it's a really good way to get in on the ground level for both ID and surveying practice. Then if you don't have a scope, I would suggest taking, but you have binoculars, I would suggest taking part in the countryside bird survey. And uh, just once you know your bird songs and calls, certainly the most common species. So that's run by Dick Coombs, and actually there'll be workshops coming up in March for that if you want to look out for them. And then of course for waterbirds, I would suggest when you certainly if you have a scope and when you know some more of the common species, I would say get involved in iWebs, especially if you can kind of count with somebody for a while and shadow them and eventually just get thrown in the deep end. This is the only way. So yeah, that would be my suggested approach.
Brilliant. Yeah. What can we do to protect wildlife without making our farmers unviable? After all, if we've no more farmers, our food security is non-existent.
Yeah, but I totally agree that it's not a case of nature or farmers. And in fact, as I mentioned with the curlew and our schemes for protecting breeding birds, we do work on the ground with a lot of farmers, and absolutely everybody who's been involved in the schemes have been so their buy-in has been just brilliant. So really, so much of our efforts are going to be and are about raising awareness, which is another reason why it's important to monitor species, so we have information then to raise awareness off the back of. But as I mentioned, it's not just a one solution for all. So it's there's lots of different elements. Like some of it will be about raising awareness about limiting disturbance and maybe coming up with clever ways so that people can still enjoy these sites without disturbing birds. I know certainly there's a lot of thought and research gone into the schemes for curlew and their breeding birds to find ways to complement farming practices. I'm afraid I don't have the in-depth details myself because it's not a project I work on, but I could pass you on to somebody if you want more detailed answers on that. But yeah, it'll come down to policy, it'll come down to awareness and just changing a lot of the ways that we do things so as to better protect our species and all the different types of habitats.
Yeah. Helen had a question about, I think you mentioned five sites supporting 20,000 birds.
Yeah.
Would you know the names of those sites?
I knew that was going to come back to bite me. I believe it's Dundalk, yeah. Cork Harbour, Lough Swilly, Dublin Bay, and Wexford.
Wexford, yeah.
Wexford, the slabs.
Brilliant. Okay, we have one last question. Grania had a question. What can we do to better legally protect our marshes and wetlands? So,
yeah, it's so a certain amount of them. In fact, a lot of our websites are special protected areas already, so that's a good level of protection. Protection from disturbance is going to be something I think in coming years that we will have to tackle in ways. Some people have used like blended approaches of only allowing dogs at certain times and things like that, and then limiting people at peak times, or maybe where there is a walkway, putting screens so that people can see out into the wetlands, but the birds can't see them. The birds are very untrusting of humans, and a lot of them will generally move away with any sight of you. So yeah, it'll come down to that, and just policy change as well, lobbying for positive policy change so that there is more protections in place at a legal level, and supporting NPWS. Ideally, our National Parks and Wildlife Service would have more resources to be able to give to this kind of thing. Is part of the problem, can be part of the problem as well.
Yeah, and all the work you're doing, recording everything that's there, helps with the protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting out, looking at them. So we've got a new bank holiday from next year, which kind of coincides almost with World Wetlands Day, doesn't it? It's the same week. So hopefully there'll be more events around that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks a million, Niamh. So just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and especially Niamh for her epic talk and all of her knowledge and all the work she does organising the iWebs, of course, which is, yeah, I think making a huge impact with that.
Thanks to everybody for coming and listening to me and putting up with the little technical glitches. And thanks absolutely to everybody who contributes to iWebs and already supports the work that we do in various ways.
Brilliant. Okay, so this will be available to view on YouTube shortly after, among others. Brilliant. Thanks everyone for tonight. Thanks, Niamh. Good night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.